All right, so we've hit the 1 year anniversary right now, and 6v6 versus 5v5 is the topic of discussion for the year. Is it a better choice to go with 5v5? Has Blizzard made the right decision? And if you've seen my previous videos, you'll probably know I don't think so. I believe, and I actually know, we're going to go over the reasons why I know that 6v6 was the better choice. Or at least that if we're switching to 5v5, we need to swap up our balance philosophy, because what we're balancing for and how we're balancing the game matters a lot more than the exact balance changes that are done tweaking the numbers one little bit at a time. I have a whole bunch of notes here. We're just going to rip through them as quickly as I can because there's a whole bunch of things to go over. I'm going to look at the positives and negatives of 5v5 and 6v6, how we've mistakenly balanced incorrectly for 5v5, and there's a reason why, and you'll see in the previous videos too, why 6v6 was the better game mode, or at least it was balanced to be the better game mode, to be the more fun game mode, as opposed to being the game mode that's just, or the game style that's easiest to manage from a manager perspective. Because that's really how most, especially too, I'll call out quite a few YouTubers, not directly by name, but even then, they've gotten so old, they don't know where the fun in the game is anymore. They're too involved with the dynamics of the system to understand, or they're trying to balance the game from a managerial perspective, because they have a community of thousands of people, and those thousands of people want things to be balanced in a certain way. So they're not just a voice for the game balance, but they're a voice for their own community. And as I've mentioned in previous videos, what people want from their roller coaster, go look it up, is not always what makes a fun roller coaster. So, number one, the introduction to philosophy, the philosophy of balance, because the way the new Blizzard team has gone about balancing Overwatch is completely different than the way the old Overwatch team balanced the game. I like to consider the old days of Overwatch the golden days of Overwatch, and they had a balanced philosophy that came from the lack of knowledge and lack of understanding of the dynamics in Overwatch, like what the best compositions are. And I think that their way of originally balancing the game was the better way of balancing it. So what did they do? What's this weird different way of balancing? Well, they balanced for uniformity. And what that means is that when you take any one hero and you put it up against another hero, there will always be a 50-50 chance of either hero winning. Now, this is just across the board. Of course, if you put something like a Winston up against a Widowmaker, then an old Winston up against an old Widowmaker, then there's no way that Winston is winning. Actually, I put my light on here so you guys can see me. Sorry, there's no way that the Widowmaker's winning against the Winston. But if you take the average of all heroes across the entire roster, then the Widowmaker had a 50-50 chance, 50-50%, wow, a 50-50 chance of winning. This is where the old Symmetra, as I was an old Symmetra player, the old Symmetra had a balance to her. And when we put her in a 1v1 situation, there still was a 50-50 balance to that. And because Blizzard had an open queue back then, ooh, I really got to get these burps up for more than anything else. Because Overwatch had an open queue back then, Blizzard was balancing for all the heroes uniformly across all interactions. As we started to refine into different roles, then the mentality of balance completely changes. There is, let's step back just a little bit. I do want to point out too the philosophy of design in terms of gameplay to story. Because one of the big things in Overwatch was really anybody could be a hero. Anybody with any skill set, as long as you were the best at that skill set, then you were the one. You were the good player. You just shone no matter what. There was no role lock. There was no nothing to stop you from being the best player that you can be. Now, of course, due to balance, and general community agreement, we decided to go with 2-2-2, being 2 tanks, 2 healers, 2 support, as a default standard. What this did is it took away from this all heroes are balanced equally, and now made it more of how are the tanks balanced, how are the DPS balanced, and how are the supports balanced. So instead of having every hero be relatively equal to itself, the individual roles started drifting in one direction. This is where, and Of course, we did end up going with goats as the standard in open queue, and the solution to that was like a Doomfist Sombra mix-up. I, for one, don't think we let the meta go on long enough for us to find a solution to goats, and there's also how we got to that. I'm not going to go into that directly. But across the board, as long as you were skilled enough, there was a way around it. And of course, we complained that things didn't feel good back then, so we swapped to 2-2-2, just because we couldn't balance the game. Across the board, we couldn't balance the game. Now, this, of course, is the fault of Brig, because when we introduced Brig, that I found that we broke that level of balance across the board. Because most of the heroes had abilities that affected them internally, that were structured around what that character did. There were very, very few passive healing abilities. You'll see Symmetra talk about this in a lot of his videos. With the introduction of Brig, Brig didn't just buff wasn't just good in the 1v1. She massively buffed the team fight. She took the average 1v1 that would normally happen throughout the fight and now meant that she was applying her abilities to all the heroes all at once, and so you no longer had this 50-50 balance. If there was a 1v1 that was happening, the Brig was also included even without thinking about anything. She just was included because of her passive healing. And well, so that just broke the relative balance of all the heroes. You never really had a 1v1 anymore when there was a Brig around. That's why we started stacking tanks. Now, the bandage to that is 2-2-2. And I do think 2-2-2 is a better way of running the game. I think most people do. But we can't get rid of the philosophy of balancing for uniformity. Now, what's happened with 5v5, and I've mentioned this before in the previous videos. Well, with 5v5, we took those individual roles and we decided how powerful should each one of those roles be, as opposed to how powerful should individual heroes be in between each other. Because we removed the one tank, not really realizing that tanks back then were balanced uniformly, we asked ourselves, what are we going to do now with one tank by himself? Well, we need to make up for that power, and I've mentioned this in a previous video. We need to make up for the feel of the game, just the feel of Overwatch 1. We need to make up for the feel of having 6 players uniformly balanced against each other, but we can't have 6 players. We're gonna have to crutch it in some way, and that's where we've moved a lot of that power off of the tank, the tank role, which wasn't really a role. It didn't really, there was no such thing as a tank. They were tanky, but we knew that they're like back in the old days, the question is, was Hog as a DPS or a tank? It's really hard to tell. Even Zarya too kind of balances that a little bit. There was no idea of a tank, but now for some reason, the mentality is we have a tank role. And what we're doing is we're balancing for feel now. Instead of actually balancing the game based off of the mechanics that are straight in front of us, we're going, how did the old game play? We want that old game's feel. We want the way the old game played, but we don't, again, want the responsibility of balancing for the game that we actually have. So, what's the difference between the two philosophies? There's a big difference. We all play games that balance for feel. And this is where kind of the corporate world has destroyed our gaming industry across the board. The example of an original loot box is something that is balanced for feel, because you're gambling feels good. Systemically, it's not very good. Oh my gosh, I gotta stop drinking Red Bulls before this. Systemically, gambling doesn't feel good, but gambling feels good. We all know that. Everybody who's gambled anything knows that it feels good. So loot boxes actually felt good. What we've done is we've removed the systemic balance of Overwatch, where the Blizzard developers were like, well, every single hero across the board is balanced. Let's get rid of that completely. Let's go for how well you feel. What does that feel like in the moment when you're playing the game? How do we make the feel of the guys that are in the high tier? This is really important too. How do we make it feel like a high tier player game without actually being a high tier player game? How do we compress that into the gameplay, and then we add systems onto other things that are simply just by, like, the system. You don't want to, like, the game should be the system. I'm sorry. The game should always be the system. And by taking, like, I don't want to loop on it too much, but it's really frustrating how we have asked ourselves, what should the game feel like first, as opposed to what is the game first? What is the system? We're playing eSport. This is supposed to be an eSport. And sports, we don't rebalance sports because they're fun. We always rebalance sports because they, well, because they're unfair in one way or another. You would never change the amount of players on the field for a football or a baseball game or any of those kind of things. You like, yes, we do across different leagues, but it just doesn't make sense that you would remove one player off of the field for a football game and buff another player on the field. Maybe, I don't know how else you'd buff them on the field in any way, like actually give them performance enhancing drugs so that you go like, okay, well, we lost one person in this position, so now this other position needs to make up for it. It just doesn't make any damn sense. It really doesn't make any damn sense. If you want the game to start from a baseline, and this is where I think we should have done it from the start, it's like, how do you rebalance the tanks so the tanks are the exact same power as they were in Overwatch 1, where they were equal and uniform across all characters? How do we maintain that, but still give them enough tools in Overwatch 2 to maintain relative power? This is where, like, healing has been buffed like crazy, but healing is not just buffed when healing gets buffed. Healing gets buffed when health pools increase, because there's more opportunities to heal, and there's more opportunities to keep people up. So you have these moments where, because the tank is taking up for 2 people for no freaking reason at all, rather than, if you manage to destroy one tank, back in the day it wasn't so bad because you had another tank set up for you, but really, you're destroying 2 tanks worth of value when you destroy 1 tank in Overwatch right now. When you kill a healer, you're not just killing 1 healer, you're also killing some of that tankiness value, because we buffed the healers again to make up for the lack of tanks. So yeah, you're killing a healer, but you're actually killing a healer and a little bit more. So that's why it feels like you're either lasting forever, the fights are lasting for frickin' ever now in Overwatch, because there's just so much damn sustain, or you die instantly. And that's just because there's so much weight being put on those individual characters. If you take a look like at really any other game out there, any other shooter game out there, most of the time they're going for uniform balance. Most of the time. Obviously, there's some exceptions where things are out of balance, but they'll never have the extreme out of balance play that you see right now in Overwatch 2, where really it's rock, paper, scissors. Rock always beats scissors, and really, scissors can fight back every once in a while, and maybe if rock beats on scissors enough, it can crack the rock. But normally, back in the old days, you wouldn't have rock and scissors. You have, I don't know, a hard metal stone and a chisel, and they can both fight each other back and forth. But then you have a second tool with that to be able to balance out that fight that's going on. Now, of course, I'm not going to argue that there was a lot of shitty games that we played where it's impossible. When the stars align for the enemy team, you lose and it's not fun at all. But I don't think that matters. I think we're in a sport. If the stars align in the wrong way and you get screwed, that's the roll of the dice. It shouldn't really affect your rank. Losses do not affect your rank, because whether it's 1v1, 2v2, 3v3, 4v4, 5v5, your rank is pretty much the exact same, no matter what hero we put you on, what map we put you on. Just because you're really good at one hero, you're gonna be like a quarter of a rank away in the rest of your heroes. And if you're not, then you just haven't specialized enough in them. So, like, a good player is a good player no matter what. I just don't think we need to dumb down the game. I don't think we need to make the game. I don't think we need to balance for feel first. We need to balance for uniformity first. Thank you for watching. If you guys liked what's going on, leave a comment. Press like, say that you watched the whole video down below. I appreciate you guys coming out. I think this conversation matters. I think we can bully Blizzard back into giving us 6v6 if we push them enough. If we really do. If the market says that, hey, we want our 6v6 back. Maybe they give us classic Overwatch. I'll play it. Hopefully I'm not wrong. Hopefully it's not as terrible as I remember. But I remember loving Overwatch 1. And I'm liking Overwatch 2. Thanks guys for watching.